Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome. Hey, Wendy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Well, this is the first podcast for the Random Fit Show. I'm excited. You excited?
I am so excited.
Well, let's see here for our listeners or viewers, depending on how you are consuming this. This is the Random Fit Show powered by NASM, hosted by Wendy Batts and me, Ken Miller. And we are two master instructors or regional master instructors for the National Academy of Sports Medicine. And we are honored and blessed today to be in front of you to discuss. Well, as the title says, it's a random fit show. So we're going to take to you guys just different aspects of fitness, whether it's uh, exercise routine, or in this case, today being our first one, we are going to talk about a training montage, or a training montage that was in the Rocky 4 um, video that, gosh, how long ago was it, Wendy, that this movie came out now?
36 years ago. So 1984, which I was like, I couldn't believe it. I actually was like doing the math. I'm like, there's no way that was 36 years ago. But it was. So, yep.
Yeah, and I mean, back then, I mean, there was no. It's not like you're logging on to Netflix or Amazon and you're just watching it over and over. If you wanted to watch a movie over again, you'd have to wait till it came out on HBO or Showtime, like
Yep.
six,
Get your
7 months after it
VHS
came out,
test. Yeah.
or bought the movie. I
Yep.
don't think it
Yep.
was Blockbuster around back then.
I think it
Or video.
was.
Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
So if you wanted to watch a movie over and over and over again, you had to actually leave your house, go to a store, and then rent the video. And the phrase "be kind, rewind"
Yes.
was in play, right? So you had to rewind it and bring it back. And hopefully, if you wanted to watch it again, nobody was waiting to swoop that thing up. But
Oh,
anyway,
yeah. It was like cutthroat. Like when it first released at Blockbuster, you better be the first one in line because everyone's going to run. You were just hoping that there was something behind that empty box. It was like
yeah,
the like
exactly.
Jack, Cracker Jack prize there or something.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm super, super stoked about this podcast. I mean, I love the Rocky 4 movie. I mean, I like all the Rockies, but something about this, and I don't know if it's just the people that were in the movie itself,
Mm-hmm.
or to me, the training montage was fantastic. And especially in 1984, you really didn't see a lot of training like that. And so I
Right.
know that's one of the reasons we wanted to kind of just randomly talk about it, talk about our thoughts on the different exercises and the approaches that they took. And, we kind of talked about this earlier. You've got country strong versus machine
Right.
based strength. And is there a difference? And if so, what is that difference? And let's just talk in general just about their training. So,
Yeah.
tell me your thoughts. Like when you think about, the highlights of the movie and everything. I mean, obviously, we want to talk about some of the comparisons, but when you look, like think about this. This was supposed to be held from the United States. There was an incident that happened. So those of you guys that are new, or weren't even born yet, that
Yeah.
need to go
Yeah.
watch this movie, we don't want to give everything away. But Rocky gets invited to. Well, actually, yeah, pretty much he decides that he's going to fight this monster guy named Ivan Drago. So yes, so
Or is it Yvonne? Ivan.
Yvonne. Maybe
Yvonne.
it is. I think you know what, you're right. It is Yvonne. I don't know. I just call him Drago, but he was
Yeah.
a quite a specimen.
I
Both of
think
them
that's
were actually.
I think that's why you liked watching it. It's like,
It
hey
wasn't
Tony,
a.
can you rewind that scene again? Can you?
Yeah, I've
Could you?
watched it multiple times for sure.
Yeah, so no so here's the thing. No spoiler alerts. We're not going to tell you how they got to the point where he's now in Russia. I believe he was in Siberia training, and we won't tell you what happens after that. Although, because it is a Rocky movie, you can kind of predict what's going to happen. Well, I guess
Well,
there was your spoiler alert. Sorry.
and talking about some like random stuff about the movie, obviously we did some research and we started digging in because I think if people think about the weather, and it's supposed to be in December, so he was going to
Mm-hmm.
fight on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. I think it was Christmas Eve. We looked up the temperature in Siberia. And Ken, I don't know if you know this, but if you were training outdoors, truly in Siberia, it would have been negative 19 degrees on average, which is like totally unheard of. So because of that, it made us kind of dig a little bit deeper. And we wanted to see truly where did they train? Because I mean, it definitely wasn't in Siberia, considering the way that he was dressed. And most of the film, especially when he goes, quote, to Russia, it was in a on a very small farm in Jackson Hole, Montana. So yeah, not Siberia.
Which can get pretty cold there too, but
yeah, absolutely. but the scenery was amazing as well. So you know what, if you check it out and you want a beautiful place to go, check out Jackson Hole.
Not in December.
Not in December.
But let's get into the training montage then, and just for those of you that have not seen any of the webinars that Wendy and our fellow associate instructor Marty Miller has produced, just so you know where our perspectives are coming from. Wendy has just been a trainer of elite athletes for the last, I don't know, 2 decades, something like that.
A long time.
Yeah. Which now, even though we're talking about boxing, a lot of the perspective I'm looking to listen to you talk about is just so for you listeners or viewers, it's coming from the vantage point of, okay, what does it take to get an elite athlete to their best shape when it comes to competition? Now, here's the thing. Now, Wendy, I know you work with basketball players. You had a strong professional baseball background as well, to where you have long seasons, right? You have long seasons, so it's not just about getting them into shape, but it's about keeping them in shape. And the one contrast with what we're talking about today related to boxing, you have at least, in a lot of cases, 3, 4, 5 months preparing for a fight. How did some of these, just a general overview, how did some of these sequences hit you, as far as how that might have, like, could you get a baseball player to kind of, or you getting in the winter through spring training, or even basketball getting ready? Actually, this would be the time of year, being October, that they would be in play starting their next season. So what do you think about some of the sequences as it relates to some of the experiences you had with professional athletes already?
Well, I mean, as we've, talked about, and I know a lot of people that are NASM certified know that it takes the body approximately, 4 to 6 weeks to adapt to whatever type of training you're doing at the time. And so in the movie, it did say that they were going to do, I think, 2 to 3 months of training. And so again, in the montage, we kind of see everything glued together of where he's starting to where he ends. And so I think, like even when in the very beginning, it shows him, for instance, just running. So let's just talk about the running conditioning part of it. It shows that he's kind of struggling in the snow. I mean, Rocky's running in the snow. Drago is actually on a track. So there is some differences. And so, I mean, do I think he could get to that level? I mean, he already had a base. And so, like, it wasn't like he was just on the couch as a couch potato who hadn't been doing anything, and then just decided that he's going to take on this crazy fight and then get into this amazing, conditioning in order to compete with this guy. And so, I mean, I think it's something to keep in mind that, I mean, it looks very progressive. And as you see, and if you watch the movie, you're going to see that their training was also very progressive, very high advanced types of exercises. But again, we're in Rocky 4, so it shows him like starting as this like skinny young Rocky, and now he's this professional, unbelievable athlete that has worked his way up in the boxing, in the boxing world. And so I think he could definitely do it. Again, in portions of it, when you look at Drago and his training, I think that's more of like what we're used to seeing. But I mean, think about where we are right now when it came to COVID. Everyone was at home and you couldn't get to the gym. And so some of the stuff that Rocky was doing, I mean, again, very advanced, but definitely he didn't have to go to a gym in order to achieve the same results that Drago ended up getting in the end.
Right, and that's where the idea of country strong versus more machine and science based training come into play, because here and when you watch the montage, as Wendy talks about the progression of,
Mm-hmm.
first he's running, and he's running on basically the paved road, so he's on the road and he's running in the streets, and of course he's being followed by you know I guess it's the KGB or some kind of security, some some kind of security
It
detail.
was his escort.
His escort. Yeah, they wanted to make sure he was safe on his runs.
Right, right.
Yeah, and then in the one scene where he's running, and then he decides, you know what, I'm sick of these guys following me. So he just takes that sharp turn and he starts running for the hills, right? So he's now running, and the progression here. So he's got some confidence. He's acclimated to the snow and the cold. He knows what it's like, nothing new to him. But then he goes into deeper snow. So he's getting into, I mean, good knee deep snow, which, hey, from a conditioning standpoint, is
Oh,
awesome, because now you're talking about resisted running, right? So if you're trying to build up strength, now you've got that resisted running in that knee deep snow, and then of course now he's climbing that mountain. He's climbing up the side of the mountain, and well, to the point where he's climbed. I don't know how he gets up there without rope and some line and to tie. When you look again, he's again hit the top, and he's got his arms up, just like he's doing in Philadelphia when he's just climbed those stairs, and he's
mhm. But as you
Adrian.
can see, again, that was a progression that you could
Yeah,
tell that was done at different times throughout the movie. And I think
yeah,
if we kind of look at even his conditioning to get himself running, there was a scene showing that he was attached to, and I don't know if it was like some kind of cart or something, and he was actually
oh,
doing like a
yeah,
mountain climber, truly, in the
yeah,
snow. All he had, 100% of what he had, really trying to build, obviously, the drive, the pull, everything that he needed. And then of course on the cardiovascular side, I mean, that was very, very intense. And then on the opposite side, when you looked at Drago, not only was he running again on a very stable
mhm,
inside, very controlled environment, but he was also using the VersaClimber. And
right,
so again, there is a lot of carryover, because if you think about body mechanics and the movements that they were doing, even though they were completely separate exercises, there were a lot of commonalities in their movement patterns on
right.
both sides. But another random fit question or topic, I guess we could say. Do you know when the first VersaClimber came out, or when it was introduced?
Let's see. So if Rocky was 84, it had to be sometime before 84, so earlier 80s at that point in time. But can
Yes,
you? Yeah.
1981. I mean, again, how old am I feeling right now? But the fact that there's still VersaClimbers in gyms just shows
Oh,
how great that piece of equipment really could be. So,
that is one piece of equipment, and neither one of us are endorsed by VersaClimber,
no.
but 5 minutes
Oh,
on that thing, it is a different challenge altogether. I mean, because we're used to, I mean, walking on a treadmill, a rower, an airdyne, or something like that. But now to get that verticality, and to get both arms and legs going at the same time. So that for Ivan Drago to spend a significant time, I mean, if that was his conditioning, and you're just climbing, 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 he was had to be in awesome shape to do that for any length of time. But there is a reason why I do not have that in my facility, because it would just gather dust. Just because I do not like. Well, I like challenge, but that's a different kind of challenge altogether. So, to your point, yeah, the contrast between Rocky climbing a actual mountain and Drago going through a similar or simulated um, exercise for conditioning, again, between outdoor country versus indoor controlled and the environment has been changed to fit your needs. So yeah, so as far as the conditioning goes, that was not a problem, especially being in altitude, in the cold, and putting all that together. Well, from Rocky's vantage point, Drago was actually in a nice, looked like 72-degree
He's in
control
his like onesie or whatever running.
and his
Yeah.
singlet, yeah,
Singlet,
and
that's it. Yes.
yeah, which I'm
And
sure
it
you
was
paid a
all
little.
white. So I was like, okay, I've never seen that before, especially at a gym. And I don't know how I would feel if I saw someone walking into the gym wearing that, but he pulled it off. So, okay.
Well, this was back in 1984 where you had the little spaghetti strap almost
Oh yeah.
tank tops with the baggy pants. Golly, what was the brand of those pants that people used to wear inside the gym?
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Those balloon pants.
Yeah, yeah.
Or it's that or spandex, which I'm kind of glad that we're out of the 80s from that vantage point.
Yeah, but before we even move on, though, I also kind of wanted to say, I mean, and goes throughout the entire workout regimen. Was when you think about when Rocky training again in the country, utilizing different types of tools and materials that he had available, because again, he needed to be separated for security reasons because he was in Russia in the 80s, and there was a lot of people that didn't like him. And but when you're looking at Drago, I mean, Drago's his type of training is almost kind of like what we're used to seeing again on a very high level. But there was so much technology that they used when they were working with him. They looked at his power output. They looked at they timed him in every run that he did. They timed him when he was doing the VersaClimber. They were seeing his output throughout his training progression, which Rocky didn't have that. And so, I mean, when you think about at that time, 36 years ago, obviously technology today, we're so used to that, and training athletes or even, just people who want to become more and more active. We're very, very lucky and fortunate because we can look at specifically our sleep, our recovery, the different types of things when we're actually working out, our steps. And so we have truly progressed within 36 years of what we have easily at our fingertips versus what they had back then, which I just kind of want to throw that out there.
Well, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, that was a government subsidized training program and facility, right?
Right.
To where we are today, the casual consumer has access to those biometrics, right? So if I saw your wrist, Wendy, I think you're wearing one right now, aren't you?
A Whoop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and earlier today I had my Polar on when I took my dog for a run. So, these things, it's funny when you do have a chance to watch the montage, you have those flashing red lights and the numbers going up and down, and he had, I don't know how many leads he had on him, but they monitored everything, and all that stuff right now is just basically something you can just pull on or strap on, and then you just look at the output, and then you are in a position to instantaneously make adjustments. It's like, okay, well, I didn't sleep well, my HRV is off, and my heart rate's through the roof. Well, maybe I'm overtraining or I'm getting sick, which back then, who thought of that stuff? It's like, hey, just suck it up and keep pushing, keep climbing, and if you're not feeling well, oh well, it's just going to take you that much longer to get through it. I mean, that was the mentality. I mean, being a high school athlete, not a very high level high school athlete, but someone who participated in athletics, it was okay, you show up and you do the best you can, but if you're not feeling it, okay, now we know how dedicated you are to the sport and the team. But now it's like that's basically what they're calling load management now. And when we look at the whole montage, I mean, to your point, Wendy, what at what point did you see any kind of stretching, any kind of
Right, no.
flexibility? Did you see any kind of like he's laying there and he's got the Normatec leg sleeves on?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
No, I didn't see any boots. I didn't see
no
any kind of
boots.
percussion. I didn't see any kind of dynamic warm up or anything like that.
Mhm.
It was more of like, I'm going to walk out the door. It's
Yeah.
chilly.
I'm
It's
gonna.
the sun's out. I'm just going to run
Yeah.
and,
Let's go. Let's go
let's
run.
get it done.
Let's get it going.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
because I
run
mean,
my.
again, back in the day when you ran, and if you ran track, you were timed for however long that distance was, and if you didn't hit your best time, you ran it again, and you ran it again, and that was it. It wasn't about your recovery. It wasn't about your stride. It wasn't about anything. It was more of just do it again, do it again. And throughout the movie, again, I think our mentality, because we've come so far with science and biomechanics and human movement research and just everything in general, and having so much education behind proper programming. Throughout the movie, you hear his coach say, no pain, no pain, even when he's fighting, no pain, and it's like he's getting the living mess knocked out of him. There's a lot of pain going on. So it really was I think it's really just thinking about how powerful your mind can be when you're working out, and that you can overcome anything if you believe that you can do it. And I think that's kind of the takeaway when you watch the movie. He believed he could do it, and he had a reason to win. And so, but man, some of the stuff he gets away with, I'm like, one hit and I'd be on the ground and done.
Yeah. Oh,
forever.
Well, let's just say that when you actually look at how big these two were, between Rocky Balboa and Ivan Drago, when you look at their actual sizes, and I know it's for dramatic purposes in the movie, but when you look at Dolph Lundgren, he was 250 pounds
Yep.
during the movie, and Sylvester Stallone was 173, 175 pounds. So they would first of all, they would have definitely been in different weight classes.
Absolutely.
But talking about that one and done, one punch from Ivan Drago, Rocky Balboa, should be on the floor.
Well, yeah, because you have that, like you said, I think it would be what is it? Rocky would have been a light heavyweight. Is that right? And then Drago would have been just heavyweight in pro boxing. So there's a significant difference. I mean, it's all about changing your weight class, but then you work your way up. And when you weigh in, you need to be in that weight class or close to it. Or you had the chance to forfeit. He didn't have a chance to forfeit. He was all in.
Well, he had a lot of motivation to get in that fight.
He did.
So let's talk about now the strength portion. So we talked a little bit about the conditioning, where he was running on on a paved road, in snow, up a mountain, in snow, up a mountain, right? So obviously his cardiovascular conditioning was on point, so he had no problems there. But let's talk about some of the things that we might do with an athlete today, which one of the staple components of a workout is your core work. If we can control this, our center mass, we can do almost anything. So again, it took me a couple times to watch through the montage before I realized, okay, hey, you know what? He's doing a lot of core work. When we talk about Rocky, that is when he's doing. Actually, so does Ivan Drago, but they're doing it in different ways. So one of the things that you get into is that, again, as you said, Wendy, he was on a farm, so he did farm stuff, right? So when you think, okay, how many of us had the opportunity to saw a log, right? So when you think about all of that motion that's coming through the trunk as he is taking that saw and going back and forth. So some of us might think of it as, just more of a push pull, but hey, that force has to come through somewhere, right? The force has to transfer from the ground, our feet being grounded into the ground, and then producing that push pull through the trunk, and then that coming through the saw and into that log. So if he had to do that just slice by slice by slice, he got a lot of repetition, a lot more than the 10 to 15 we might say somebody can do, should be doing a crunch or something like that. But he got a lot of work as far as his trunk goes.
Oh, absolutely. And then you also think about too, when he does, one of the things that one of my favorite things that he did was he took a rope and he actually grabbed it. It was filled with a net full of like big rocks. And he was actually doing, basically some lifts, some rotational lifts. And,
Yeah.
if we're like comparing it back to like the NASM OPT model, I mean, we do cable lifts and cable rotational chops and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
there is a lot of carryover. And again, it doesn't show him doing more like, little to no joint motion of the spine. He's not doing a ton of planks or something. And so again, because he had already probably progressed when he came into this area,
Yep.
again, because it wasn't like he came in super weak. He truly is building foundational core strength that's going to allow him to lift more, move more, and become more powerful when he actually does some of the power stuff that he progresses to throughout the movie as well.
Right.
So that was one of them. And then, again, I don't know, did you have like a favorite like exercise that he did that you were like, dude, that I like that?
Probably not like how you liked it, but when, when
I
he
don't know
was
how to take this, by the way.
well, when he was on that bench and he did that dragon flag, so he's got
Oh,
his body in that plank position, and he is at 60, 45 degrees, and he is just lowering his body just as one unit down
so
to the
slow. He's decelerating so slowly. Oh.
yeah. Now, okay, you got a little drool on your right here. Um,
No, I would love to.
but
I've never been able to do that. Never.
no,
So,
and I don't know too many people who can. But if you really think about it, again, that's what made this movie pretty innovative. I mean, again, through all the Rocky movies, you had these training montages where he's getting ready for the big fight. It's the build up, and then they get to the fight. So, but I'm trying to think of any other movie that had training montages like Rocky did, right? Considering
yeah.
it is a boxing based movie, but when you look at the exercise selection, so for them to whoever the technical director was, okay, so for this exercise, or for this sequence, let's have him do this exercise. Because here's the thing, for Sylvester Stallone to do all of that stuff as an actor slash athlete, there's no doubt about that, the fact that he's an athlete, but for him to do that dragon flag and lower himself down, I mean, where else have you seen that being done in a movie as far as any exercise sequence goes? So that is the ultimate demonstration of core strength and stability for that to happen. So like you said, he not a whole lot of spinal movement, but he was
Mhm.
definitely challenging core stability as we would call it today. But
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, so overall, I mean, I'm trying to think of other movies where when you look at training sequences, and
Mhm.
there's a few MMA movies out there, and you know other training sequences. Vision Quest comes to mind. As far as high school wrestling, I watched that one a few times, but that particular exercise was the one that kind of sticks out the most. And
Mhm.
for you, Wendy, what any particular sequence sticks out?
Well, again, I was more just amazed of watching someone being able to do that with that type of form, because again, he was pretty
Hmm.
dialed throughout the entire form. And then of course, as we know, when you decelerate, it's so much more challenging
Yep.
for the body to be able to slow that type of motion down, especially if he's weighing in at, what'd you say, 173. So imagine controlling that amount of weight.
Shredded.
Which, I mean, yeah. And so I would say, like when they were progressing, when they got to more of, quote, the power phase of what we would traditionally
Hmm.
call power, I was like, how are they going to execute this? Because obviously they showed Drago doing the typical hang clings with the bar.
Hmm. Yep.
Of course, he's got his platform, and he's loaded up and he's doing his thing, and he's going max out. Like, can he get his 1 rep max, and how does he look doing it? I mean, again, he looked fantastic doing it. But then at the same time, you've got Rocky that's mimicking that same pattern, and he's using a carriage filled with people. And the same thing, he's lifting, instead of it being a bar that's in a controlled environment, he's inside, pushing up this carriage literally loaded with adults, not kids, but adults. So the amount
Right.
of weight that he's pushing up as well. So I thought they did a really good job. Again, country strong versus it being very machine or typical gym based type approaches. So I liked that, the comparison, because again, it showed that they still hit the same types of muscles. They felt that doing those same types of movements would be important for their sport. And again, they're training for a sport. But I really like that, because I'm thinking, man, how are they going to do this? And sure enough, all of a sudden, here goes this carriage up. And
Yeah. And I think, every other, the trainer, you had Polly, and I forget who the other trainer is. And then you had Adrian in there, and who knows?
Adrian.
Yeah. I'm all in.
I'm all in. Yes, I know.
I think that was the first time that phrase was used on the movie. I'm all in.
I'm all in.
Yeah, you complete me. But as far as, so getting back to Drago, I mean, he had, like what we talked about. So as far as his strength, I mean, remember he did those trunk twists.
Oh yeah.
The seated trunk twists. I mean, I don't recall. I don't see those in gyms anymore.
Well, probably because they realize what it's actually doing to the lower back and the sacrum and all that. Being locked in. However, but in comparison, Rocky was doing, when he had that big log or whatever it was, looked like
the yoke. He had that ox yoke. Yeah.
That's what it was. And he was mimicking the same movements, but again, he's doing it in the snow. So he's kind of, doing more total body with that.
Yeah.
That was good. Or when he's doing the sit-ups, when his feet are locked in and he's coming up and rotating side to side and then back down. Once she said it was all in, he upped his game. And I mean, he was ready to move on to power and make it happen. So
he was hanging upside down from the rafters like a bat and doing his sit-ups. And so he definitely upped his game. Well, he just needed his wife with him. That's all.
I know.
That's what he needed.
And then, of course, when you look at these specimens, and then you probably saw this in the movie, when Drago had fought in American, again, we won't tell you all about the movie in case you haven't seen it. But again, it is a must see. I mean, even today, I love it. The music is fantastic. It's so fun, but you got to go in with a fun attitude, or you're going to be like, wow, okay, so this girl has lost her mind. But I thought it was interesting because, again, when you look at these guys and you looked up Sylvester Stallone, not just his weight, but I mean, his body fat in this movie was recorded at 2.9. And they were talking about nutrition and everything, obviously not in the movie, but like when he was getting up to this movie, and he was saying that his diet was horrible. They had him on limited calories, a ton of caffeine. And so when you see how lean these guys are, but in the movie, when Drago's wife came and they were getting interviewed, they asked, how was he so big? And the first thing they asked him was there any PEDs, any performance enhancement drugs? And she flat out said no. And as we saw during this whole training thing, there was a needle that went straight into his arm. So, there was some enhancements. And I know in the 80s, Russia had been kind of busted with some of that in some of the professional sports. So, that kind of holds a little true. It doesn't say Rocky. They're saying he's all natural. He's the good guy.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, they had him on cigarettes and coffee. That did not happen. There's other movies though where actors have had to lose a dramatic amount of weight, unhealthy as was said, but that's where I heard it from. I forget which actor and which movie, where they had him cigarettes and caffeine and water, and just they wanted him to look emaciated. But so that alone is just, that's a big point to what Sylvester Stallone had to do to prepare for that movie, because if you're just on an extreme calorie deficit and you had to work out and perform on film to do all of those things, to maintain your strength and power to do those movements. I mean, I'm sure like the pile of rocks in the net probably weighed like 4 pounds or something. It's all
I don't believe it. I don't believe you.
Rocks, and they spritz them down, grease them up a little bit, make them look a little shinier than it. But still, I mean, even the body weight stuff was just extreme. I mean, as far as it gives you something to, this. If I were to have one skill that I want to be able to do in the gym, that would be it. That would be it. Um, but again, back to with Drago. Overall, I mean, he had a lot of the. Again, he had his data analyzed. Now, what they did with it, I mean, that's the big question even today when you talk about all the measurables. Heart rate, HRV, looking at your blood profiles. The question, even as it is today, as it was back then, is what do you do, right? How do you manipulate the programming to adjust to what you're finding in some of the data that you're gathering in a lot of cases. So that's where I think when it comes to performance and conditioning, it's just as much art as it is science. As far as, okay, you have the information, now what do you do with it? Like what we talked about earlier is like um, recovery and rest and rejuvenation and all that stuff. If they saw their numbers kind of climb up, what do you think were the options at that point in time to get them back to? It's like, what, his blood levels of this and that are a little bit up. Okay, how do we get it down? So who knows, Wendy? Maybe what was in the needle was something to kind of level out his blood levels.
I'm sure it was. I'm
Maybe that's
sure.
we can't make assumptions because she did say there were no PEDs uh, involved in his conditioning.
I must break you.
I must break you.
Oh my gosh.
Uh,
One of the best parts about that is Polly, which for those of you guys that have never seen the movie, Polly is Adrian, which Adrian and Rocky are married, but he is this little guy that like kind of hangs around and he's part of the family. And, before the big match, he's like, I just want to say that I would love to be you. And, like basically just trying to pump him up, just saying how special he is and how dedicated he is to the sport and the reason that he's doing this. And then, of course, once he does the "I must break you," and they tap boxing gloves in the very beginning to after the introduction, he says, "No, I remember what I said back there. I take it all back." So I think we've all been there at one point. We think we're super ready for something, and then you get there and you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not ready." So I think to your point, I think obviously, and I keep saying this now. I mean, we have come so far and in our training regimens, and using something like the OPT model has really helped me personally, because again, I do train professional athletes. I train everyone, but that's usually the most of the population that I work with right now. And having the stepping stones and really being able to progress someone when they're ready. But see, again, I look at movement patterns, I look at the assessments, I look for compensations, and it's my job as a trainer to help really make sure that we minimize those compensations by stretching the right things, activating the right things, and doing the right exercises to make sure we can hold that new range of motion and perfect alignment. So therefore, when we do get them up to power, they are going to be extremely powerful, and obviously reducing the chance of any kind of injuries to happen. And so I don't know back in '84 that many clients or I'm sorry, trainers that were doing assessments. Again, I know, technically the NASM methodologies and the curriculum that we have today was never put into NASM until 2000, so 20 years ago. But this is still 16 years before that. So
right.
I'm sure there were trainers, nutritionists, and everything that were involved truly on the appearance side of the game to get them to look and move that way. But I would love to have been able to be a fly on the wall to truly see their training that they did to prepare for that movie, because their movements were incredible. Incredible.
Right. And just think, if the training model that you're describing with flexibility, attention to range of motion, progressions from stability through strength into power, like how many athletes, from the beginning of time could have extended their careers 5, 10 years? I mean, you look at Tom Brady in his last game, he played against the team where one of the players is the son of a guy that he
Saw
played
that.
against. And I saw, and I can't remember the name, but when you're still playing at the highest level possible, and you're playing against the son of a guy that you played college football with, there's a lot to be said about how you are treating your body. So it's not just that you're a really good athlete in the position that you're playing, like Tom Brady is at being a quarterback, because here he is, he's playing against you know kids that are half his age, if you think
Yeah,
about it. So, and I know, when you look at some of the things, the companies that he's involved with, recovery is a huge part of how he lives his life. And, knowing somebody that has worked with him, how he has nutrition, his how he treats his sleep as important as his conditioning. His sleep, his rest, his recovery, having, you know, the cold, what the cold blankets.
oh yeah.
Yeah. His room is blacked out and all of that stuff. So you're ultimately maximizing your rest. And back then, and can you imagine Rocky? He's up at the break of dawn. The roosters are crowing, and then they're waking you up. You got light coming in through the windows, right? You're up when you're up, and you sleep when you sleep. But to know that people today are achieving things that haven't ever been achieved before, and breaking the norms of how long they can actually be competitive. So if you think that, with Rocky or Drago, if they had paid attention to those other things, like their flexibility routine, their stability, and how they treat their rest and recovery, as well as nutrition. I mean, those guys, or any other athlete with taking those steps in mind, could easily extend their careers, however good they are and viable at their position. So, um, again, going back 36 years ago, and what we know now, if it was applied back then, who knows who would be able to watch today if they had stayed healthy.
Oh yeah. Well, and it brings me back to, I mean, if we're bringing in specific athletes, I mean, you take someone like Grant Hill, he had a really
Yeah.
nasty injury very early in his career. And, a lot of people, they didn't bank on him. And of course,
Hmm.
again, he met, Dr. Mike Clark, who obviously was the founder of the
Yeah.
NASM OPT model. And we, me personally, even, worked with him, and his goal in life was he wanted to play until he was 40, and really watched his flexibility. He was foam rolling. He's, did the percussion. He did everything that he was supposed to do. He followed the model, worked on stability, worked on balance, worked on the things that a lot of us take for granted, because it looks easy, even though we know that it's not. But again, that's why I like the assessments and knowing somebody, and then,
Hmm.
obviously thinking about their sport to make sure that they can do what they need to do successfully. He was able to play till he was 40. And then he told us, I
Yeah.
should have told you I was until I was 41,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
a huge advocate for utilizing the model and utilizing the right components. Because again, like you said, without flexibility, without proper recovery, without proper nutrition,
Hmm.
some of these athletes will never hit their goals, because again, they have to maintain a certain amount of minutes on the court or time in a game, but then,
Yeah.
and be at the highest level and be able to turn it on and turn it off. Because again, if you don't have the ball and you're sitting there and then you get thrown back in, you sat down, you completely recovered, but you don't want your muscles to cramp up, or you don't want anything to, not
Hmm.
work the way it's supposed
Right.
to. So when you get put back in the game and you've got to perform again, quick speeds, different type of agility and movements. I mean, it's the training programs for any athlete, not just boxers, but just any athlete in general, super, super important. But to your point, if you don't recover right, you don't have the right nutrition, you're going to be missing something. So,
Right. Right. So when it comes to Rocky Four, and what
sorry,
what
we'll bring
what
it back.
I know, maybe it's something we can talk about in another podcast. But
Yeah,
when
I
we
like that.
talk, yeah, when we talk about Rocky versus Drago and what they did to be at the top of their game, there's a lot of dramatics from the movie standpoint. But one of the things that Wendy and I wanted to talk about was, or discuss and bring to light, it's like, it wasn't an archaic way of conditioning. They were doing a lot of things right. I mean, former technique wise, but they were hitting, a lot of things that we would talk about with core. Again, saw on the log, chopping wood, moving rocks, doing a chop with rocks in a net. So they were doing a lot of things that we would do today. Although, when you're stuck in a farm, and that's what you have to work with, what you got, kind of like where we are today. When we had shelter in place a lot earlier, and people were doing garage or home gym based workouts, it is possible to still get to your goal. You just have to be a little bit creative when it comes to how you challenge the body. And if you take these things, I mean, basically everything that we've talked about, from what we saw Drago doing, what we saw Rocky Balboa doing, and this last little bit with what we need to consider for keeping our body in shape, with flexibility, paying attention to nutrition, your recovery, our sleep, and all those things wrapped up into a total conditioning plan. There's no reason why you, and I'm talking to you as a viewer, if you're working out, if you have a body, is the saying, if you have a body, you are an athlete. So it's only your responsibility, whether you sit behind a desk, you are now a corporate athlete. If you are, if you're, you are, if it's your responsibility to take care of what you have, so that you can do whatever you want to do as long as you can do it, right? So overall, that's the message we wanted to throw out for today. However it was portrayed 36 years ago from a professional boxing standpoint, to what can we do to refine and take advantage of all the information and the technology that we have. That's part of what we want to bring to you through this Random Fit show. So with that being said, Wendy, any last words for today?
No, I mean, again, without giving it away, just think about this: who wanted it more? So that's what it came down to. And again, Rocky has come a long way from even Rocky 1 to Rocky 4. I mean, again, Rocky 1, he was putting eggs in this raw eggs in
Wow.
a glass and drinking it down, and that was his. He would drink that and then he'd go out and run. And
Right.
I mean, we've come obviously like just very, very far and multiple aspects. But I think, again, just be creative in your training. I mean, that's kind of the big takeaway, that you don't have to go to a gym in order to be successful, to look a certain way, move a certain way, or feel a certain way. That, to your point, whatever you have available, make that part of your routine. Do stuff that you enjoy. Have an end goal, because if you have an end goal, you're going to set a timeline, and you really are going to be smart in your goals. And because if you're just working out for the sake of working out and you don't have a plan, then you're never going to know if you're going to actually hit that goal, because you never set one. So I think setting a goal is going to be super, super important as well.
Right. And Rocky had his goal. He wanted to beat the Russian, and Drago had his goal, which was to beat the American. So
December 25th, they had a deadline too,
they
and that
had
was
a
just
deadline. Yeah.
it. Yes. So,
Awesome. All right, Wendy.
fun. So yeah, I enjoyed this.
This was a good time. So until next time,
Yes.
and on behalf of, for Wendy and myself, thank you for being here with us and spending our time with this first episode of the Random Fit Show. So take care, everybody, and we will see you next time.